everybody. It's David with No Chaser, and today I'm going to talk about something I have mentioned probably just in passing before. It's a phrase that I may have tossed out and never fully explained, but in addiction, there is this thing called harm reduction, and basically, it's this thought of you. It's difficult because it's a very controversial topic as well, too. You'll see it a lot in things like smart recovery or that's a cognitive behavioral therapy based sort of recovery platform. And essentially, it's the idea of the way to go if you're unable to do complete abstinence. There's many ways that people define it. The way I would define it would be essentially is that you are minimizing the harm you're doing because the best way for no harm is pure abstinence from drug and alcohol. But if you just can't find a way to do that, and this is where it gets controversial because, the idea of many people in the recovery community is that, well, everybody can do that. Everyone is capable of that. People that lived in Skid Row and were completely hopeless, even people that, were refugees from a different country coming to a new one that came with addiction problems. I mean, just the gamut of all the stories of people that have had harrowing lives with just an insurmountable amount of trauma, and they were able to overcome it and get sober and clean. So, if all that happens, so can you. And anyways, before I get into my thing, so the harm reduction is like the examples of it would be one of my friends throughout high school. And when I was doing drugs and opiates with him, he would go on to continue his opiate career. I would be like a gentleman and move on to alcohol, which actually I would always get in like a worse state with alcohol, especially when I was younger, because like when I was on opiates, I didn't really want to do anything. But when I was drinking, like mainly when I was young, I got in all sorts of trouble and just, you want to do stuff. Then when I continued drinking and drank by myself, then it was back to just not wanting to do anything. Anyways, but my friend who, like I said, continued his opiate career, so to speak, and, his tolerance went up. He got harder and harder to worse drugs like fentanyl and everything like that. He now is basically a super big pothead. And he uses marijuana like as a dependency. People ask if marijuana can be an addiction. And it's like, when that's posed to me, I just kind of go, well, yeah, because have you seen My Strange Addiction, the TV show? Like you can get a sort of psychological dependency on just about anything. I don't mean like you take a person and they can get, but the human brain can form a dependency on sort of anything. So, of course, marijuana, which provides like good feelings and is, a chemical that you ingest. Of course, that can be an addiction. Now, do I think that oh boy, man, I'm just getting into all the controversial topics here. What am I doing? But do I think that marijuana itself is like particularly on par? Like I did a video about this. It was probably one of the videos that had the most dislikes in all the videos I've ever done comparatively, right? Asked the question, is marijuana a real addiction? But with that, besides that point, if you want to see my thoughts on that, you can check out that video. But my point being is that he moved on from he was able to get off fentanyl, which is, particularly deadly. It's really the drug out there, not to claim, which drugs are worst or anything like that, but it's, it's by far the most kind of deadly, acutely deadly because of the overdoses and everything like that. But he smokes a ton of weed, and that's kind of how he gets by on his life. And that's like, I would say one of the most like stark, and of course it's one I know personally, like stark examples of harm reduction. Is he ever planning to get off weed? The last time I talked to him, really not. But he lives a life now. He can kind of do things. He's a lot more functional in the world. It may not be the greatest of sort of outcome that you'd want with all sorts of outcomes, like, being completely sober and everything like that. But I mean, it's inarguably better than the life he was living. A big thing with harm reduction kind of comes down to the fact of, is it something that you aim for? Like for him, I have an alarm going off. Sorry. Man, I gotta get it together one of these days. More professional. Anyways, but with harm reduction, it's where it gets really controversial is that if it's ever something you aim for. Like my friend just kind of fell into it, and there's even still arguments to be made of, hey, should you try getting off pot? Man, I sound like such a dork. Should you get off weed, you weed head? But like, really, should you try to? Because because you have addiction in your mind. You have an addictive mind. So should you try to get off that and fully live as yourself? There's questions of like full self-actualization to be had here of whether harm reduction is a viable thing. And like I said, the real controversy is whether that's something you particularly aim for. Like you take a person that has been to rehab over and over and over again, me as well. But you take this hypothetical person and they keep crashing and burning, and they've never had any long sobriety time whatsoever. They've never, not only have they had tried like all the sorts of different treatments and options and stuff and different recovery meetings and groups and everything like that. They've not only tried all of them, but they can't even like put together more than 2 months or like anything like that. And they've never done it in their whole life, but they have been able to like smoke weed and keep off harder drugs or hard drinking. And so do you like kind of throw your hands up and go, all right, well, we're going to do that. Some people would say that that's the case of harm reduction, where it like you do something less, and it gives you a chance to be functional. That's not to say like harm reduction just in and of itself. It can mean a lot of other things too. Like sometimes harm reduction in like a public sort of like health thing is that you like the free needles and stuff like that they give out at like certain hospitals, or giving out Narcan or something like that for opiate addicts in major cities. Like, Portland was one of the first ones to do that, to have free needle clinics where you would also not only get people to have a chance to get clean needles, but you'd also have the opportunity to check up on them, to like, kind of just do a quick health rundown, stuff like this, where you just basically admit, the biggest thing is about harm reduction is that you're admitting that there is a problem, and the problem is at the time, and I guess that's a key phrase, is that at the time it's too insurmountable to be faced with the, I guess, ultimate desired goal. So whether that's like no heroin, nobody addicted to heroin on the streets, or on the personal level, which I'm more talking about, like no drugs and alcohol whatsoever, complete abstinence. Like if that does not seem viable whatsoever, that's where you have harm reduction come in. There's other forms of harm reduction where these are the ones that I think is kind of crazy. If I may throw in my 2 cents here, there's ideas of harm reduction of like doing your drug of choice just less so. I don't know. It's just, I'm sorry. It seems kind of crazy to you take a person who is addicted and you're like, just do less fentanyl, do less methamphetamines. I know you were drinking over a bottle of vodka a day. Just drink less, which is kind of like, I don't know. I'm pretty sure we've all tried that. I think that's like part of what makes the definition of an addiction, is that you can't do that. You can't regulate or moderate like whatsoever. By the way, I don't know how you moderate fentanyl, but it just, yeah, some people take harm reduction in that sense. And like I said, that seems kind of crazy. Or no, it doesn't seem crazy. It just seems kind of like silly, because it goes back to, if you're addicted to something, the whole point is that you can't do that. But so like the harm reduction is, as it's more so noted, is that, weed is really probably the number one with the harm reduction, because it lives in this own little kind of separate sector of like how much less harm it does. You have something like drinking, where there's, someone who's addicted, and I've seen this many a times where someone who's addicted to drugs, and then they'll be like, all right, I'll just have a couple of beers or wine or something like that. Even drinking messes that up because it like supercharges their brain to get that sort of release again. And then they go, okay, you know what? I'm now still addicted to the release, and I'm going back to my number one, my first love, my drug of choice. And that's not to say that weed can't do that as well, too. I've seen many cases of that where somebody's like, they're going to try the harm reduction thing, or they're just kind of, maybe they have a lapse in just smoking weed, and then they're like, all right, I can just smoke weed. And then the weed itself isn't the problem inherently as the substance, but it leads back to them using their substance of choice, which is the major problem. And so, I mean, it's really tricky. Like I said, harm reduction is an idea that's very controversial because it's like, some people just think, no. I mean, some people think it, I think, for almost two reasons. One's almost kind of like this weird moral reason where it's like, no, you have to do it the right way. You have to do it this way that I know how to do, which is, the pure abstinence thing. Which honestly, I do a little finger shake thing, but I honestly, personally, just think that's kind of the best way. Just because the way that, like, if weed gives you a release, or if anything gives you, if you, like, if you get into a sort of cross addiction, or your harm reduction is doing some sort of behavior, and that gives you a release, and that's how you push away feelings or dealing with life, that's kind of the same problem. And like I said, it's always like, I was a very long time ago, back when I was like 19 and I first went to treatment for opiates. My whole thing was that I got really into fitness, like not as a good way or a healthy thing, but got really into working out. I even worked at like a GNC, which is like a supplement place, and just my whole life revolved around it at that point. And then I got injured and I couldn't work out. And then I was very screwed because I had nothing. I didn't realize how big of a crutch that was. And so, it seems like, I mean, some people would say harm reduction is just a nicer way of saying cross addiction. And just your cross addiction just happens to be less sort of troublesome. But I don't know. I'd love to hear other thoughts about that. Put it in the comments. Tell me what you think, because it's there's probably a lot of anecdotal evidence of it working, just like kind of with my friend. And then there's, I guess, the big philosophical question of, is that actually working? And I would say for him at this time being, yes, because he has a life that's functional, and he almost died many times on fentanyl. And if it's keeping him off that for now, though, then that's something, that I could live. I mean, I say I could live with. It's his life, but something that I would find as a viable solution for now. I think the ultimate goal should be to not be dependent on anything to handle life and to face it, head on. If you're, an addicted person, but I know it doesn't always go that way. If I was addicted to something like fentanyl and I was just near death many, many times, I just have like Narcan with me and everything like that. And I could have some sort of reprieve and with something to where I could get my life back on track. I mean, I don't know. It feels like I would take that option too. My thing is I don't really like weed. So I would never try it. God damn it. Did this turn into a weed one again? That's just the one that's the biggest about harm reduction. Anyways, tell me what you think about the idea of harm reduction in the comments. And I would love to hear differing opinions, because I'm sure there always is, and they're always fascinating me. Other than that, be well.